Welcome to Adventist News and Views, your video source for the latest information and insights shaping the Adventist conversation, brought to you by Spectrum. Here are the highlights of this week. We examine the fading legacy of Adventist Review, once the heartbeat of Adventist communication, but now struggling to stay relevant. Chris Blake critiques the Church's silence on justice and how Adventists dance, urging believers to speak out like Jesus did. Admiral Nakube argues that the Adventist Church has reached a cultural tipping point and must radically rethink how it connects with today's generation. Trudy J. Morgan Cole reviews a moving story of how one Toronto church responded to homelessness with radical hospitality in encampment. Christian Record Services names a new president with decades of leadership experience to guide its ministry for the blind. Plus, Spectrum Journal Spotlight and our video of the week featuring Ginger Ketting-Weller, president of the Adventist International Institute of Advanced Studies, in a talk on integrating faith and business. First up, we begin with a review of the Adventist Review. Stanton Witherspoon charts the rise and decline of the Adventist Review, once the heart of Adventist communications. It began powerfully in the 1800s with James White's little paper that united believers, shaped theology, and informed the global church. But over time, especially in the digital era, the magazine has struggled to keep up. As members turn to faster, interactive platforms like social media and independent Adventist outlets, the review has stuck to safe, slow, and outdated methods. While past editors like Bill Knott maintained tradition and Justin Kim was expected to innovate, little has changed, leading to confusion, missed opportunities, and lost influence. With declining relevance and the closure of Adventist World, the article questions whether the review will boldly reinvent itself for today's digital world or fade into the past. In his article, How Adventists Dance, Chris Blake uses dancing as a metaphor to describe how many Seventh-day Adventists avoid speaking about injustice, especially regarding the harmful actions of Donald Trump. He argues that while the church once stood boldly against evils like slavery, it now often stays silent on serious issues like racism, corruption, and attacks on vulnerable people. Blake challenges the church to stop dodging these moral responsibilities and instead speak up clearly, just as Jesus would. He encourages Adventists to join groups like the Just Love Collective and Adventist Peace Fellowship, which are actively standing for justice, compassion, and truth. In The Tipping Point, Rethinking Adventism for Today's World, Admiral Nakube argues that the Adventist Church is at a critical crossroads, out of sync with today's rapidly changing world and younger generations. He critiques how the church still clings to outdated methods, revivalist nostalgia, and rigid structures that no longer resonate with a generation shaped by digital culture, distrust of institutions, and a desire for authenticity and impact. Many young Adventists are turning away, not due to theological disagreement, but because they feel unheard, disconnected, and boxed in by bureaucracy. Nakube calls for a radical rethinking of church structure and leadership, urging local churches to build relational, Christ-centered communities that prioritize listening, accountability, and cultural engagement over mere tradition and performance. Trudy J. Morgan Cole's review of Encampment, Resistance, Grace in an Unhoused Community by Maggie Helwig explores how one Toronto church responded to the growing homelessness crisis by opening its grounds to an encampment of unhoused people. Drawing from her own experience as a church community services leader facing a similar situation, Morgan Cole reflects on Helwig's candid, compassionate account of the joys and challenges of helping marginalized communities. The book portrays the unhoused not as problems, but as people, while exposing how bureaucracy and systemic injustice hinder meaningful solutions. Helwig's story and Morgan Cole's own serve as a powerful call for churches to respond not with fear or convenience, but with sustained, Christ-like commitment to justice, empathy, and presence. Christian Record Services, the Seventh-day Adventist ministry serving blind and low-vision individuals, has appointed Cesar Perozzo as its new president following a nationwide executive search. Perozzo, a former pastor and human resources leader in the Carolina Conference, brings over 25 years of experience in ministry and administration. He replaces Diane J. Thurber, who retired in July after nearly a decade of leadership. North American Division President G. Alexander Bryant praises Perozzo's passion and leadership, expressing confidence in the future of CRS. Perozzo, in turn, emphasized his commitment to the ministry's mission and strengthening partnerships to expand its impact. Be sure to check out these and other stories that are shaping the Adventist conversation on our website at spectrummagazine.org. Spectrum Journal Spotlight. Check out our latest journal pieces featuring in-depth analysis and thoughtful reflections on faith, theology, and contemporary issues. And finally, our video of the week features Ginger Ketting-Weller, president of the Adventist International Institute of Advanced Studies, in a talk on integrating faith and business. Watch the full presentation now.
When I went to the U.S., all of my working time, when they ask you to speak, they don't tell you what you're going to say. They just ask you to speak. But in Asia, they give you a topic. And I'll tell you, it's a spiritual discipline to prepare a topic that someone just hands to you and says, this is what you're going to speak about. But I always find that I learn so much by speaking about the assigned topic. So the assigned topic that I was given for ASI a few weeks ago is faith and business balancing professional and spiritual lives. And I thought, well, we talk about the integration of faith and learning all the time in education, but the integration of faith and business, what am I going to say about that? So I started doing some researching and some thinking and applying the same principles that I apply when we're integrating faith and learning. And once again, I was blessed by what I learned as I was studying, so I'm happy to share that with you. Now, we have the Yap sisters here, and actually I've seen some of this apply in their lives, so they can probably give you exemplars or examples as we go through, but you can see if you think you have examples. So here we go. I want to introduce you to Augie. Augie is the architect that we use at AIIAS. We have been building various buildings over time, especially under the president that came before me. He was a real fan of building things, and I'm more of the academic person. And so he would work with Augie, and one of the things that he made with Augie, you see here the auditorium where we have church, with the 3 V's that mean the 3 angels' messages. Well, my husband said, no, it's actually a W, and it stands for the Wellers are now here. But that's supposed to be in symbolism for the 3 angels. And it's really quite interesting. When I first came, I didn't like them at all. And I said to the plant services guy, Elmer, when those get feeble, let's just take them down. Let's not try to repair them. But you know, now they've kind of grown on me. So I hope they last for a while. Yeah, the 3 angels there. But here I am working with Augie. We were doing some planning on a new building project. He also built these duplexes for us. All of our faculty live in duplexes. So even the president, we're on one side of a duplex and an Indonesian family is on the other side. We never put people from the same country together because the philosophy at AIIAS is you need to learn from people from other cultures. So you will never live next to somebody who's from your same country if we can help it. We'll put you next to somebody from another country. And then here's the high school that was finished during the time we were there. That's where my husband is principal, and he's also a faculty in the education department. And it's a really wonderful building. Do you see the twisted columns in front? Augie came up with that design for twisted columns because he had read that when Solomon built the temple, he had twisted columns. So Augie wanted something that represented the wisdom of Solomon on the high school. And that's why he designed these twisted columns. Had he ever designed something like that before? No. Did he know it was going to work? No. But it worked because Augie's very careful about what he does. And then here He's built some of our residence towers. We have typically about 16 apartments in a tower. And when people come to study on our campus, they live together in the towers, and as I said, we put them next to people from other countries so that they can learn about other cultures and ways of thinking and ways of being an Adventist and so on. So it's very good for them because we're preparing leaders for the church. Augie is a very interesting man. Here is when he was working on the high school building. The way that they do it in the Philippines, I don't remember them ever doing it this way in Penang when I was growing up there. But in the Philippines, you bring all of your workers who are going to work on construction, and you make little shacks right beside where you're going to build the building. And then those workers live in the shacks during the time that they're building. And when the project is done, then they go back to their island that they came from. And that way, the contractor, which Augie is the architect, but also the contractor can get cheap labor from other islands and bring it to Luzon and then build it for us there. So Augie had these guys working on the building, but he wasn't just building a building. Augie's philosophy is that he wants it to be artistic and creative because that's how God is. But he also wants to build people. So what he tells these guys is, when you come and you work for me, we're going to have worship every morning. And then he also starts them in on Bible studies. So by the time he's done with any given project, when he's done, there are baptisms. There are people going to church. They take the gospel back to their islands, and there are baptisms. And that's how Augie does his business. You see, he takes his business and he integrates it with faith. And he shares his faith within the context of his business. And there's always a wonderful result out of that. A wonderful result. So I'm talking about the integration of faith and business. And I know that there is this, you can use your business to make money to spread the gospel, but I don't believe that's enough. I think you should integrate into your business your faith as well to affect the people that you do business with. Now I know that there are some business environments in which we can't share our faith because maybe there are some rules against it. But there are some sneaky ways, some modeling ways that you can do to share what our values are as we follow Jesus in this world. Let me share with you a book called Loving Monday. This was written by John D. Beckett, and he has another couple of books that he wrote after this. But he wrote such meaningful words about the integration of faith and business, and I'd like to share those with you. I think you can see it pretty well. Work can be filled with meaning and purpose. The key is integrating work and beliefs. As a result, both grow. Beckett brings all of life together: work, belief, value, character, relationship, truth, worship, and joy. All of that is in his work, but it's also about his faith. The result is employees who feel valued, enjoy their work hard, and are successful at what they do. When I think about the institution that I lead at AIIAS, we have about 135 employees. And I would love to be able to say that we have employees who feel valued, enjoy their work hard, and they're successful at what they do. For the large part, I think we do. We start every day with staff worship, but also we care about their personal spiritual lives. And let me say a little bit more about that. John Beckett writes, "For years, I thought my involvement in business was a second-class endeavor, necessary to put bread on the table, but somehow less noble than more sacred pursuits like being a minister or a missionary." I talked with our dean of the School of Business when I was the vice president for academics at Walla Walla. And he indicated to me that Adventists see business as a second-class endeavor. I said, "What?" He said, "Yep. The pastors, the teachers, and the missionaries are up here, and the business people are down here somewhere." Really? Oh, and the doctors were up here too. All the medical people, they're up here. So I said, "But why? Why?" Because I've seen business people who live out their beliefs in what they do. But this is what he said. So I've kind of been watching ever since because I want to prove him wrong. So he says, but here's John Beckett writing about it and saying, Business was necessary to put bread on the table, but somehow less noble than more sacred pursuits like being a minister or a missionary. The clear impression is that to truly serve God as a real Christian, one must leave business and go into full-time Christian service. Over the years, I have met countless other business people who feel the same way. My friends, if any of you are business people who feel this way, let's change that tonight. Because being a Christian in business and integrating your faith with what you do is the highest level of service to God, just along with the others in which we integrate our faith in God with the service that we do. The reason is clear, Beckett goes on to say. Our culture is thoroughly saturated with dualism. In this view, business and most occupations are relegated to the lower, the worldly, the material realm. As such, they are perceived to lack dignity, spirituality, intrinsic worth, and the nobility of purpose they deserve. Francis Schaeffer, looking back over the legacy of nearly 3 millennia of Greek thought, proposes this radically different view of true spirituality. And here's the quote from Francis Schaeffer. It is not only that true spirituality covers all of life, but it covers all parts of the spectrum of life equally. In this sense, there is nothing concerning reality that is not spiritual. Business is spiritual, nursing is spiritual, medical missionary work is spiritual, pastoring is spiritual, teaching is spiritual, driving a bus, for Pete's sake, is spiritual. Because it's who we are and it's what we bring to what we do. Nothing is less spiritual just because it's some other career. So I loved this approach when I was reading what he said. Indeed, there is a dramatically different way to view the world and our work, a view which liberated me to see business as a high calling. But to have this view, I had to look through a different window. Some time ago, one of our customers clandestinely copied our product with the intention of competing against us. Copyright violations, stealing an idea. I fretted over how to respond, aware that if this customer's plan succeeded, our company could face painful decisions, such as laying off people. Then the Lord nudged me. The Lord nudges us all, no matter what our careers are. When we have given our lives to follow Him, He gives us those little nudges, those little aha moments that come often early in the morning when we're studying the Word and praying. The Lord nudged me to put Him first. How, I asked, should we work through this dilemma? The answer came in a thought I knew was not my own. We would offer to buy the tooling and full rights to our competitor's new design. Do you see what he just said? You stole my idea, but I'm going to buy it back from you. Can you imagine? They, in turn, would agree to a long-term commitment to continue using our products. What an idea. I vividly recall the tense moment when, during our face-to-face meeting, our competitor considered our proposal and then, breathing a huge sigh of relief as they agreed to the plan. My earlier attempts and human wisdom to find a solution brought impasse after impasse. The workable and very elegant solution resided in God. Time has validated the approach. We have kept the business and, equally important, maintained a close relationship with this customer. What an unusual thing. In the world that I work and live in and have done so for very long, we would have sued the customer for stealing our idea. We would have proven that it was our idea. We would have caused as much pain, and we would have gotten our lawyers to go after money to pay us back for what we had lost on it. And yet, this guy was praying, and God nudged him to buy back the very design that had been stolen from him. And it was peace as this ended, rather than discord. What a thought. I don't know that I would have done so well. So one aspect of putting God first, says John Beckett, is trusting Him first above our own wisdom and cleverness. One evidence of that trust is whether and how I listen. When I'm in a business meeting, I find I make the most effective contribution when I quietly ask the Lord, What is your point of view on this? How would you like me to respond? Then I stayed poised for his guidance. A nudge, a phrase, an idea. You know, God solves our business problems much better than we can solve them ourselves. Beckett says, I'm learning that putting God first is more and more comprehensive. It means first in the morning, beginning the day in the Word and in prayer. I used to be content to read the scriptures anytime I could squeeze them in, but I found that when I put God first in the morning, something I've read or prayed about often applies to a business situation later in the day. It's as if God prepares and equips me in advance when I start my day with Him. I have found that as well. Before I came to AIIAS to be the president, we had a Get to Know the New President event in Southern California. And they brought some of the former presidents there to come and meet me. And one of them was John Pesudima, an Indonesian who was a former president of AIIAS. And so they asked each of these former presidents as we had our potluck, can you give Dr. Ginger some advice as she's going to AIIAS? And one guy did a long speech, and I'm really not sure what he said. And then another guy kind of didn't say too much because his dementia was starting to set in. And then John Pesudima spoke up, and he said, well, I just have one prophecy for you. You are going to pray more than you ever have in your life. And that was it. That was his advice. Let me tell you, I have prayed more than I ever have in my life. I'm usually up at 4:30 in the morning doing my devotions, and then I sit there and go through my prayer list, and there are things that come into mind. And they come in after a good sleep. If I have a good sleep, it kind of clears my brain out, and then I pray to the Lord, and a solution will pop into my head for some problem I'm working on. Not always, but quite often. So it was nice to see John Beckett talk about that too, about how important that time, first thing in the morning, before the sun even comes out, you're up and you're in the Word and you're praying, and God is getting you ready for your day. He continues, it also means God is first when I am confused or sense danger. It means first when my relationship with another person is under strain. It means first before I try to do it on my own. When we put God first, He is able to shape our character to reflect His character. Each workplace challenge becomes an opportunity to reflect the character of the God we seek to honor, to be His representatives to our co-workers. So the very first thing about integrating faith and work, and you know this, is that we have to integrate our personal faith with our personal work. So I want to talk about the workplace, but I wanted to start by talking about personally. That personally doing our work is so rewarding when we're integrating it with our personal devotions, our personal walk with God. So, some of you know this person, these people, right? I want to talk to you more about the integration of faith and work in a broader sense. This is Dr. and his wife, remind me her name? Mary was my mom's office nurse in Penang. I remember thinking when I was a child, we're supposed to be missionaries and we're supposed to go and introduce people to Jesus. But I never saw my parents doing that. My parents went to work and worked hard every day in the hospital. And my mom delivered many, many babies, of which Shunei was one of them. And 17,000 babies in her career. And they were just working all the time. So I never saw somebody go into the baptismal tank in Penang Adventist Church and say, it was the Kettings who brought me into the church. Never. So I was always thinking, how am I supposed to do that? Because the people who brought people into the church was like your mom. She would have Bible studies with people and they would come into the church. But my parents weren't doing that. They were just working as doctors. And so I always was working with this idea of how do you be a doctor and be a missionary, or how do you be anything other than a chaplain or a pastor and be a missionary? And their mom was one of our chaplains in the hospital. So I was pondering that quite a bit. And then Dr. came back from his training. He had gone to Valor Medical School. Now Valor integrates faith with practicing medicine. And you would think that Mama Linda would do the best job at this. have to tell you, the Lord is way better. Because everybody that Penang Adventist Hospital sent to medical school in the Lord came back not only knowing how to be a good doctor, but also giving Bible studies and doing evangelism and so on. And one of the things that we saw about Dr. and Mary was that he would invite his patients. Would you like Bible studies? And then he would give them Bible studies, maybe on his lunch break or maybe in the evening. But it was so inspiring to see what he did. Now, I'm not saying that my parents didn't inspire others. People come back all the time to tell me how they were inspired by them. But as far as watching people accept Jesus as their personal Savior, as far as watching people be baptized in the church, some other people did maybe a better job of integrating actual evangelism with their work. Whereas I think what my parents did was to integrate purpose and quality and spirituality with their work. So I think we need both. We need both. But I learned a lot by watching some of these others. So let's talk a little bit about the research. I wanted to share some research that shows that fostering employee spirituality improves business well-being. And I'm going to go through a number of studies here, and they're not all from Christians, but there are a number of these studies that come from Asia. Here is one by Ashmus and Duchamp, and it's their findings were that the spirituality view is that work is not just meant to be interesting or challenging, but that it is about such things as searching for deeper meaning and purpose, living one's dream, expressing one's inner life needs by seeking meaningful work and contributing to others. In other words, when you have employees, they have these needs. And their needs are not just give me the tools to do my job or give me the training to do my job. It is also, I want my work to be meaningful. I spend so many hours a day at work, and people are looking for that to be meaningful and purposeful in the world. So the question is how we can do that. A study from South Africa concluded spirituality in the workplace is about individuals and organizations seeing work as a spiritual path. Isn't that an interesting phrase? People want to see their work as a spiritual path, as an opportunity to grow and to contribute to society in a meaningful way. Here's one that was done. This is by a professor who does research in Santa Clara University, which is a Catholic university in the San Francisco Bay Area. And she wrote, business leadership requires experience, profound levels of wisdom, discernment, and compassion, which can only be achieved through introspection, self-discovery, and adaptation. Without a strong sense of self and one's convictions, decision-making of such consequence can become paralyzing. As mentioned, the study of spiritual beliefs builds a person's spiritual muscle memory that can be called upon in the midst of crises and dilemmas. Okay, let me just stop right there. If you have Bible studies at work, like Augie does with his contractor, with the men that he contracts to build things, that can build spiritual muscle memory, and when you're in the midst of a crisis, that can be called upon, that spiritual muscle memory, to solve those dilemmas. Isn't that interesting? Let me share another observation connected to this. When I was in college, I had a psychology teacher, and he scoffed at this idea of spiritual muscle memory, because actually, this is not anybody who studied Ellen White who says this, but Ellen White does say that by rehearsing God's Word and studying God's Word, the mind is like a muscle that we exercise, and it becomes stronger to help us live as Jesus lived. And here's this professor from a Catholic university saying the same thing, that as we study God's Word, it's like a spiritual muscle memory that carries us through the tough times and the challenges. Spiritual muscle memory aids in making difficult decisions because a person does not need to search the soul for how to proceed. The leader's character and convictions are already established. Knowing this, the connection to personal and professional purpose helps prevent burnout. And we do have a lot of studies of burnout. But if we're doing this daily study, this daily time with God, it works, she says, against burnout. With their internal compass in place, leaders are able to direct and inspire others to achieve greater things. As such, spiritual maturity strengthens one's ability to be an effective leader. So I don't say it's unethical to be a business leader as a Christian and not be every day spending time in the Word and building that spiritual muscle memory. Then we go to the issue of job satisfaction. This one comes from Indonesia, so this was more with a Muslim point of view. It was a study of travel agency employees, and they were looking at workplace spirituality, and they said that spirituality in the workplace, as supported by the leaders of that workplace, actually had an indirect and a direct impact on the employee's job satisfaction. So having that spiritual time, for them I assume that had to do more with their Muslim beliefs, but they were more satisfied at work when their spiritual lives were addressed there. Another one from India, measures of quality, productivity, and profitability. Workplace spirituality, or the freedom to speak about spiritual things and integrate spirituality with work, has a significant impact on work attitudes like organizational performance, job involvement, job commitment, and job satisfaction as a whole. One of the things that I saw a lot in the Adventist hospital when I was growing up was that the doctors and many of the nurses and of course the chaplains would pray for the patients. It didn't matter that they were praying from a Christian perspective, the patients still really appreciated it. It's a very difficult thing as a human being to go into the hospital and suddenly your whole life twists around and nothing is familiar and there's a crisis going on, and then someone comes in and prays for you, and it makes a huge difference. I remember seeing pictures of my parents praying before they picked up the scalpel to do surgery, and how much it meant to the patients that they were prayed for before their surgery. And that still happens all the time in Adventist hospitals around the world. So as you have the freedom to speak about spiritual things, your job satisfaction is higher, your productivity is better, and the organization does better with profitability. Two more. Leadership style and performance. This was in a bank in Indonesia, and they said that spirituality affects leadership style. Spirituality, leadership style, and the work-life balance affect job performance. So this is a chain reaction. Spirituality affects the leadership style, and that affects everything all the way to job performance. We can't afford not to talk about spiritual things with our employees. And then finally, one that was specifically focused on women leaders. Women leaders are highly aware of their spirituality and religious affiliation, which influence their work and work spirituality. Workplace spirituality includes how women leaders approach life and work, how spirituality expands their concept of religion, and how the interwoven concepts of spirituality and religion help them to manage their work optimally. So this was from South Africa, and we were looking especially how women integrate, as leaders in businesses, how women integrate spirituality with their work. So we have some take-home lessons. The first one is that businesses, faith and career and business are not a balancing act. They have to be totally integrated in our lives. We can't say, oh, I'm going to do some spirituality now, and now we'll get to the real thing, that's the business stuff. It has to be totally integrated. And actually, in my opinion, that means it's integrated also in the way that you treat your customers or your patients or your clients. It has to be integrated into all of that. That spirituality is influencing everything that we do. A quote from Christ's Object Lessons that I found was really interesting by Ellen G. White. And it says, religion and business are not two separate things. Did you know Ellen White talked about religion and business? Religion and business are not two separate things. They are one. Bible religion is to be interwoven with all we do or say. Divine and human agencies are to combine in temporal as well as spiritual achievements. They are to be united in all human pursuits, in mechanical and agricultural labors, in mercantile and scientific enterprises. There must be cooperation in everything embraced in Christian activity. They are to be one, totally integrated. Lesson number 2. When we are leaders in business, we need to give attention to the spiritual lives of our employees. And so, again, another one from the professor at Santa Clara University. There is a growing interest in the role that spirituality plays in modern organizations. As workers increasingly ask how their careers fit into the larger picture of their lives, undoubtedly questions of meaning, direction, and connectedness arise. We were just talking this evening about meaning, direction, and connectedness. This is the heart of spirituality. And as leadership roles become more challenging in this chaotic world, a strong spiritual foundation provides the character, integrity, and convictions that support clearer discernment and compassionate decision-making. I would want, as a leader, that always my employees would perceive compassion in the decisions that I make. So that comes from this sense of integrating spirituality and our business. And let me say once again, we're not business people in order to fund our spiritual outreach, but we do our spirituality in our business itself. It's not just a means to an end, but it is our way of reaching people. And the final lesson, lesson 3, I think it's the final one. When our priorities are right, everything else falls into place. God must also be first in business. John Beckett says, I found that when I put God first in the morning, something I've read or prayed about often applies to a business situation that arises later in the day. It's as if God prepares and equips me in advance when I start my day with Him. There was one weekend that I was asked to speak for a graduation service in Canada at our Adventist college there. And I was speaking for the Sabbath service. So I came up there to Canadian University College before the weekend, and the Friday night speaker was the conference president from way the east side of Canada, Nova Scotia. He was from there. And I didn't know him at all. But when he got up and he shared, he was so humble in the way that he shared. And he showed a picture of his study, and it was very clear the sun had not come up yet. It was in the dark, but he had one light on for a reading light. And it was over a chair with his Bible sitting on the chair. And he was telling the students, first things come first. He said, every morning when I get up, I go to my worship chair and I sit with my Bible and I read. And then I take out a blank piece of paper and I say, God, what is your agenda for me today? I was so shocked when I heard that. God, what is your agenda for me today? Because I was vice president at Walla Walla, and my agenda was already full before I ever went into the day. And this guy's a conference president. How can he have any less to do than I have to do? And yet he's taking out a blank piece of paper and saying, God, what is your agenda for me today? I've started, I don't think I'm as good as he is at it, but I've started to realize now, as I have my worship in the morning, something pops into my head. I need to talk to that person today. I need to do this today. I need to prioritize this thing today. And even though I have appointments all day and plans for my day, I better pay attention to what comes into my head when I'm connecting with God before the day begins. Because faith has to integrate with business. And faith has to guide business. So the take-home lessons: integrate your walk of faith with your business life, give attention to the spiritual lives of your employees, and put God first, and He'll equip you for each day's business decisions and challenges. And that's what I have to share with you tonight. Thank you.
Okay, any questions? Anything?
Melody sent me some questions about AIIAS, but let's see if we have any questions or comments about this first.
Any one of us can answer.
Let me tell you about AIIAS. AIIAS was started by the Far Eastern Division, which was headquartered here. The first start on this was in 1972, when they started the seminary. But then officially with the country of Philippines, it started in 1986. And the purpose of AIIAS was because when we would send people to the US or some other Western country to get their upgrading, they didn't come back. And so what happened was that we were kind of brain draining our own church by sending people out as sponsored students. But then they would say, oh, thank you very much for the education, I think I'll stay here. And so the idea that the leaders of the division had was, we need to have a world-class institution here, just as good as Andrews, just as good as, a really good school. So they started AIIAS for that purpose. And there are only 4 programs because we only do what the church needs to prepare leaders. And those 4 programs are seminary, education, business, and public health. And we go to the doctorate in all of those. We only do graduate education. We don't do undergraduate. We only do masters and doctorates, except public health, we don't have a doctorate. But everything else has both masters and doctorates. And of course, you can imagine, we're dreaming about the doctorate in public health as well. But we only do what the church asks for. So that's what we do at AIIAS. We have about 200 students on campus and another 400 to 600 that are in extensions, online cohorts, and so on off campus. So we're not a very big school. We have faculty from 20 different countries. We have students from 60 different countries. And those students come from all over the world, every division of the World Church. So do the faculty. I was looking at the map because I presented at the General Conference earlier this week, and we don't have a faculty member from the South Pacific Division. So I need to go talk to Australia and say, hey, you got to send us somebody who will be a faculty member for us. But we have faculty members from every other division. And so it becomes a very international school. It's like we're this little island of the UN in the middle of the Philippines. And even the Filipinos get culture shock when they walk onto our campus because it's not like anybody's home country. It's like this mix of everybody's countries together on our campus. So it's a really fun place to work. We have a lot of students who come that are sponsored, but it's only about 30% of our students are sponsored. The rest are self-sponsored, which means that I'm always running around raising money to try to help students who can't make ends meet. And I never thought I would be a person who would ask for money. But when it comes to my students, I'm fearless. And there was this really fun thing that happened last February. I was back in the US, and I went to my mother-in-law's town. My mother-in-law is no longer a Christian. She gave up faith back in the time of Desmond Ford, and she has never come back. But we go to church every time we're there, and we were just giving a little mission report. It wasn't meant to raise money or anything, and a lady came up to me, and she said, well, I would like to send some money to help your students out. And I'm telling this story partly because I know you've been approached by a student for help. She said, I would like to send some money to help your students out, so how would I get it to you? So I said, well, give me your email address, I'll send you the information. So I sent it to her. This was Sabbath that she said this to me, little old lady, and I found out later she's from Denmark. And I'd never seen her before. So I sent her the email with the information Sunday. On Monday she called me. I was just going into the dentist office, and she said, well, I wanted to talk to you about this a little bit more because actually it's $60,000 I want to give you. What? And so, God sends us help when our students need it, and it's a very exciting thing to do. Yeah. Okay,
That's it for this week in Adventist News and Views. Subscribe for more stories that matter to the Adventist community, and let's keep the conversation going.